like I said, I didn't know what the word kayfabe meant, but I kayfabed anybody if I didn't know you.
Right.
You know. And I was just like, hi. And Joey Maggs looked me dead in the eye and said, you're doing it all wrong. And pretty much I was like, well, get the hell out. I didn't, that kind of hit me wrong.
Right.
But the fact is that Joey Maggs was right. You know, I didn't know it, but, you know, this was still my little territory, you know, and I felt a bit possessive of it and I felt a bit intrusive. But he was right. We're doing it all wrong. That was my first meeting with him. Jimmy Leon, we just shook hands, and then I really don't recall too much after that. I still did a couple more shows at the North Avenue gym, and there a fellow by the name of Dave the Surgeon. That's
Dave Coleman.
Dave Coleman. He, I guess, he saw something, and he said, let me stay and help you guys. And then that's when he started telling us the right way to do things,
okay.
Like working the left side as opposed to the right side, and the sense of timing. And he actually helped me develop the show to be a little bit better. Dave Coleman spent a lot of good time telling me to do things this way, you know, and I appreciate him for that because not taking anything away from Joey Maggs, but I felt that Joey's approach to me was wrong, though he was right in what he said. But Dave kind of like eased his way in and appealed to me in a different way to help me out. But it wasn't long after that I do believe that I think the organization that I had kind of got sabotaged by Jimmy Leon, and that didn't bother me any, because then that just told me at the time that it ran its course as well.
Right.
You know. And I think Jimmy Leon started doing some things. I might be mistaken, but I do believe he started doing some things at the North Avenue. And that's when I kind of like, okay, this part's done with me. I'm out of here.
And you're moving to the next phase. Jimmy started running shows in Virginia, Maine, some other places, along with Maryland.
Okay.
And he would have helped a lot of those guys in that period get some of their start and train some of them. So you're actually, instead of you coming in and Jimmy helping you out, you're paralleling him. You're both coming up at the same time. Because most of the time, what I see through the history of investigating our own business shows that a lot of guys went to Jimmy. But Jimmy had to have another place, another where to go. So yours was parallel to that. That's intriguing. Most fans won't know that. Most fans won't know any of that.
Well, you know, some people in my little circle trash Jimmy Leon. I really can't trash Jimmy Leon. I didn't really know Jimmy Leon.
Right.
But even though I felt that, you know, they came in and took what I had, I can't say anything bad about Jimmy Leon because he played a pivotal part in forwarding wrestling in Maryland.
Absolutely.
You know, because he took it, in my opinion, and took it to the next level. It was almost like a natural process. It started with me over here in Carroll County, then to North Avenue with Dave Coleman helping out. But that can only go so far, so Jimmy Leon came in and propelled it to the next level. I haven't got a bad thing to say about Jimmy Leon. As a matter of fact, I think I met him maybe a year or two later on some shows, and he'd come up and, you know, say, hey, how you doing? I want to talk to you. And he wanted me to actually go to Puerto Rico with him, but I was so tight with Dave at the time that he said, I want you to go to Puerto Rico, but I don't want Dave to go to Puerto Rico. But I was like, I felt the commitment to staying with the tag team at that time that I had to turn them down.
Carroll County would have been, what, 85?
I'm thinking 85, 86.
Okay, and then North Avenue is probably 86, 87.
I'm thinking that too, yeah.
Okay, all right. And from that point, you start to gel and you start to step on your own. You start to develop into a little bit of a professional wrestler.
At that time, no.
Okay.
That's when I was like, well, I don't know really where to go because I still didn't think I was WWF material.
Right.
I just didn't think I had it.
Okay.
And I just kind of like, I actually went into a depression for a while, and I can't tell you how long it lasted, but I didn't do anything. Maybe a year. I don't know. But then at that point, you know, Dave Casanova called me up and said that he was looking for a tag team partner because the one that he currently has isn't working out.
So where along your journey did you meet Dave?
Well, that was still in my North Avenue days. I was still preparing for the first show, and I was working as a plumber's apprentice for my uncle. And we were working on the block in Baltimore. I'm sure everybody watching this that's involved in the wrestling business know what the block is, but for those that don't, it's a length of strip joints. It was a couple blocks long at the time. But anyhow, we were working in one particular building, and I hurt my knee in wrestling. And I was still nursing the injury, and I was coming down the steps and limping out and going into this parking lot to my car. Well, who happened to be managing the parking lot at the time was Dave Casanova, and asked me, first question, how'd you hurt your leg? I said, pro wrestling. I said pro wrestling, even though we weren't pro. I had to say pro. And he was just like, what? I go, yeah. He goes, you're a pro wrestler? Of course I said yes, but, you know. And I was like, yeah. He goes, I want to talk to you. And so we just started talking at that time, and that's how I met. He worked the parking lot in the building where I was working at.
And after you met Dave, then he wanted to become a wrestler?
Dave always wanted to become a wrestler. He wanted to become a wrestler before I met him. It's just that fate, you know,
Brought you together.
brought us together. Exactly, yeah.
So from that point, you and Dave start to conspire to, hey, this is what we got to do. How do you take that next step forward to get to develop what would later become, in our opinion, probably the best tag team that the Mid-Atlantic's ever fostered, put together, and that's the Cream Team. How does that step go from meeting on the block to that point?
Well, we never had it in our minds that we would be a tag team. Now, like I said, there was a lot of things about the professional business that I didn't know, but but for some reason, the principles of it seemed to be instilled in me. Mm-hmm. And my first thought was, well, we train at this gym over here, not far. I said, you can come up and you can train with us, but you got to pay your dues. You got to help set up the ring. You got to do this. You got to do that. I had guys, you know, that when they wanted to start off, they had to do this and that to prove that they wanted to be in it. And he helped set up the ring, and he did a lot of things. Yeah.
So,
but we didn't start off as a tag team. That never occurred till, I'm thinking maybe a year and a half, almost 2 after we met. And so I met with him and the manager at that time, which was a fellow by the name of Smooth Johnny Silks. We met, we all hooked up again and decided, well, okay, let's do it. That's when I actually started making the leap towards the professional business.
But it doesn't sound like it clicked right away with you that this is going to be a tag team. How did that develop, Rip?
Well, like I said earlier, he called up because his current partner wasn't working out. And I don't think it was because we both saw something in each other that made us click. I think it was convenient for the both of us. He needed something because he really loved tag team wrestling. And I needed to get back into the business. And how was I going to do it? Well, getting back in it with Dave as a tag team's a start. So it wasn't because that we thought that we clicked in terms of personality as in a tag team. He just needed somebody, and I needed somebody, and so we both used each other to advance it.
Okay. What's the story behind taking the name Cream Team, and is that how your first tag team came about? Is that what you called you and Dave from Jump Street?
I believe it was our first name, but we had Dirty Don Peacock as our manager at the time. And we were trying to figure out a name. So we go to these shows, and I think at first it was just Rip Sawyer and Diamond Dave Casanova, because we couldn't think of a name. We'd throw this out, we'd throw that out. No, that's not good. And this would go on for the longest time. It was actually aggravating to me, is I couldn't think of anything. Whatever I threw out, they didn't like. Whatever they threw out, I didn't like. And then I think it was Dirty Don that came up with the Cream Team, because he had a dirty mind anyway. And so we were like, I was like, Dirty Don said the Cream Team, and Dave's like, I like that name. And I was like, ugh. I was like, really? I hated it. I hated the name then, and I hate the name today. but you know, I was just like, it's 2-1. I'm so tired of figuring out, you know, trying to figure up a name. I just didn't feel like debating it anymore. I was like, I don't care. Cream Team's great. But I hated the name. It was just a horrible, horrible name that actually played against us a couple years later with a scandal involved in the WWF. But it was just a horrible name. But yeah, we pretty much had it from the beginning. It was our first name, and it kind of stuck there. And unfortunately, I had to live with it the rest of my life.
Back in those days, there were a lot of wrestling magazines out on the stands. Do you think that name prevented you from getting some print coverage?
I got the magazine set aside to show you that we got coverage. I think out of the independent wrestlers, we were probably, in that area, the most heavily promoted in wrestling magazines.
Well, there's no doubt in my mind, my very first match, my very first professional match, was myself and Bill Cook as the Chicago Hitmen against Rip and Dave, the Cream Team, in Odenton. That was August of 1990, right?
I believe so.
That was August 1990. The magazine that covered us was Wrestling's Main Event, and we got pub on our first match only because of you guys. And they had a bunch of pictures, and we were in the pictures, and we were like, this is great, and I can't believe it. So, yeah, those early days when magazines were so influential in the wrestling business, that was the hallmark, the trademark, if you will, of what meant that you were starting to succeed. You guys got a lot of good pub.
Well, you know, Dave and I were actually ahead of our time in terms of what the gimmick actually was. You could take a lot of the things that we were doing in 89 to 92 and see the seeds of what we were doing, then forwarded to when Degeneration X.
Right.
A lot of the things that they were doing were very reminiscent of what Dave and I were doing.
Right.
We might not have went as far as what they did, but we were ahead of our times. We were trying to push the envelope in certain things. Like when we do our promo videos, we would do it at the block.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we didn't do anything that was explicit, but we would show, you know, the rated X letter and stuff like that, and such things, and just try to throw little, innuendos out there in a lot of our talks and promos and stuff like that.
Well, and wrestling is all about that innuendo. That's the hook, and that's what you were trying to do. You guys get together. You have your first match together. What promotion would it have been at that time, if you can remember? Your first match together as a Green Team.
I really can't remember. It might have been David Lehigh.
Okay, down in Virginia.
It might have been, but I'm not too sure, because we were back and forth in Virginia and Pennsylvania an awful lot back in those days. So I'm really not too sure where we made our first appearance as the Cream Team.
Okay. If we're trying to put a date on it, it would have been in that 89 era, and it would have probably been for, who were the promoters at that time? David Lehigh, Dick Karakoff,
Right.
Ed Zahn.
Right.
There was one or two. Lou Martin was actually promoting through Maryland. There was a few others. Again, they were the base promotions that were there. But you start to make your circuit through those.
Right.
Can you tell us a little bit about that time with you traveling with Dave? How it started to develop, because you guys became, to watch you in the ring and the tag team philosophy and the tandem work was incredible. And this is still in the early 90s. So it didn't, in my opinion, didn't take you guys that long to click. But talk a little bit about that early traveling, Rip.
I think in the beginning, Dave and I, once we saw the similarities that we had, not that we were twins, but we both had the same features in a lot in terms of the hair, the build, and the overall look. And just when we travel, it's all we talked about, what we were going to do, and it was just constant traveling, constant talking, and then eventually a lot of the things that we did as a tag team were wrong. We didn't really know how to work a storyline at the time. All we knew was how to do double team maneuvers, and we did them so effectively well, that got us over. Fortunately, though, the promoter David Lehigh probably had the most faith in us out of anybody that I've ever met, although I think he spoiled us as well.
Mm-hmm.
He gave us, and I'm saying this in the nicest way, he gave us way too much too soon in terms of the faith department, and therefore that's where another story kicks in about the bloated ego that I think that both of us had. But David Lehigh was so impressed with us, from my memory, that he started, after a few small matches, he started right away booking us against the Rock and Roll Express and the Midnight Express and things like that,
Mm-hmm.
And that's where we actually started to learning the business, through all our mistakes. Oh my goodness, the embarrassing mistakes that we have made with the Rock and Roll Express, but we learned something from them, and that's how it all, came together at that point.
Ed, not to interrupt you here, but The last information we got about Kevin the Truth Casey is that there was even a possibility that he might have had a crushed larynx in this situation, and that's what we're checking into right now. Ladies and gentlemen, if you're having a little trouble hearing Ed's on at the present time, we're just having a couple of technical difficulties with Ed's microphone. We want to bring you up to date as soon as we can on this situation with Kevin the Truth Casey, how our broadcast team is going to work here at the UIW, and you saw it for yourself between Max Thrasher and Axel Rotten. It's Axe and Max now, and that's quite a situation there inside.
Well, I'll tell you what, I put many hours into putting that match together. I looked at every way I could to make a fair match. Number one, you know, that was the demand of Kevin Casey, to put his career on the line and Dave's career on the line. He wanted the color commentator's job. And to be real honest with you, he was the last person I wanted sitting on this desk every week.
Well, Ed, believe me, in this position, I can appreciate that.
Well, the thing is, when the contracts were signed, the deal was made that Kevin would be sitting at this desk doing the commentary. And right now, I'm going to be going to my lawyers this week and talking to them because, number one, as far as I can tell, by Kevin's currently not being here, his contract is now null and void.
So in other words, it's a violation.
It is a violation.
And that constitutes the cancellation of the contract.
That's exactly right. And there's another thing you have to look at, and that is the spirit of the law and the way the contract was written. You know, every time something happens in UIW, it just boggles my mind, the things that goes on between people. What's happened between these four individuals in the ring? What's going on with Max Thrasher and Dave the Wave? The situation with Axel Rotten being part of Chaos Enterprise. What just happened here no more than 15 minutes ago. Absolutely incredible that this type of thing is going on. You try to rein these individuals in, but you can't take.
Rip, do you think working with the Rock and Roll Express and the Midnight Express helped your sense of timing and development as a tag team?
Not so much with the Rock and Roll Express, maybe more with the Midnight Express and the Fantastics. I think they helped us develop the timing sense. The Rock and Roll Express taught us something totally different about the business, and that was to deflate our ego. Although it deflated it some, we were humbled after our first match because it was just horrible, but we really didn't know how to work. And we were up against these pros, and they treated us as, you know, marks at the time. And I didn't like them because of the way they treated us, but it was a humble lesson to learn that experience. But as time went on, we were still getting matches, booked against the Midnight Express, which at that time was Jim Cornette, Stan Lane, and Jeff Collette as his partner. And then eventually we got to work the full Midnight Express with Bobby Eaton in it. But they would teach, and the Fantastics, they would teach us about timing and how to work that storyline. So we learned humility from the Rock and Roll Express. As a matter of fact, I remember Robert Gibson saying to us before the match, he said, do you have a full-time job? I said, yes. He goes, well, you better keep it. And I didn't know whether or not he was insulting me or telling me that there's no money to be made in this business. Probably both.
Right, a worker's education.
Right, exactly. But I was just like, oh, what's he really trying to tell me here? And that was a humble lesson too. But I became, I don't want to say good friends with Robert Gibson, but through the years when there would be shows around here, I'd pick him up at the airport and we'd always have a good time with each other.